I'm going to ask you the same question that I ask every guest who comes on the show. And this is going to be the subject of the second book that I end up publishing about the work that I'm doing here. And the question is, what is your evolution of race consciousness? That is, when did you first understand that there was this thing of a racial hierarchy, a ranking of humans based on this imaginary construction of race, and that you fell somewhere in there and so did everyone else, and the consequences varied according to shade and according to geography and everything else? How did you come to learn of this and understand this from an early age?
Um, Very interesting question. As I was thinking about it, I want to say that I've probably always been conscientious that I was Black or African. I am first generation American. So there was always an inherent awareness of being different. My parents being from three different countries or continents that have their different, I guess, relationships with colonial powers or racism. Um, but my first exposure to finally realizing that I was subject to it probably came when I first attempted to get my mortgage. And the gentleman, being of a different older generation, an older white male, kept trying to spend hours attempting to discourage me from applying for the application. And then noticing once he had finally got my application, because I had to go to one of the minority representatives, explain the situation, trying to figure out what was the commotion or the difficulty in getting my application submitted. And after talking to him, he then took my application and proceeded to try to get my business over the next few months while I was purchasing my home. And that's when I started to see the economic or systemic effects of racism that I hadn't quite experienced in my early years of life, because my circumstances or situation of life was vastly different than what the typical African or Black experience would have been considered based on how you read about it or the things that you constantly see on the news. So the mortgage application process is when I started dealing with the financial and the banking, is when I first got enlightened into the system.
Okay,
So yeah, that was my first.
All right, I hear that. So I'm going to challenge that, though, because, all right, now you still had knowledge of the system of racial hierarchy before that. Isn't that correct?
So knowledge from a theoretical standpoint. So when I say that is, I grew up in a middle class neighborhood. So I've been in the house ever since maybe 5 or 6 years old. I've been in a neighborhood that had successful Black people, so they worked in government. I'm from DC. So the circumstances, situation, the type of people I was surrounded, most people with college education. So those were the elements of people that I lived around. And I didn't start realizing, like, the whole thing of getting a mortgage was after I got into the job market. And I noticed some of the things that people had talked about, such as, like, I would be one of the people who would be the Black people dressed in the suit when a lot of us were relegated to certain roles. You might see us, and this is before the advent of technology to where it is today, but a lot of us were in positions associated with administrative roles or cleaning or cafeteria or security. And so I typically was in roles as an analyst, technical writer. So those type of roles that were a little bit more different than the norm that you would see Black people relegated to. And this is, I guess, after the 2000s when I graduated.
Okay, so you have knowledge of the system, but you don't have firsthand experience until you experience this mortgage debacle. But you are a rarity, so to say, within the workplace environment as someone doing more of the more higher paying, I'm assuming, and more technical jobs. So now, would you say that your understanding at that time, you're starting out in the job market, you're doing your thing, Would you say your thinking about race maintained itself or remained the same from then to the present, or has it changed? And if it has changed, how?
So it has changed drastically. I guess when you're young and the way you see the world is kumbaya. Everyone is like, oh, we're in this together. And then when you see people get a little bit older, either they have their children or their own life circumstances, people tend to justify the excuse of being more selfish or more geared towards focusing on your own. I guess I started noticing and seeing the pattern. And I felt as though, because I didn't have kids at the time, my circumstances in my household, being raised by a single mom with 5 children, and I've always had to take on that role of that absentee father or that void. I guess as I started seeing the system and the way it would define me and the role of what I played, I guess I just saw myself vastly different. I grew up, again, my mom was a Muslim. So everything that I would hear of the messaging, the ideas, the identities, and how quickly I saw like Muslim became terrorism to me, I guess after graduating at 20 with Obama being elected and then seeing the progression towards Trump, it seems, based on my travels as well, that things have gotten worse. Whereas where I used to travel and I would see people would greet us as African Americans kind of like we were celebrity, kind of like, whoa, you guys are here. There's the American culture people are fascinated by. And now after Trump, I noticed a shift towards us being treated like with a lot more skepticism, things that you might read about theoretically or hear about in books, or being challenged or questioned, and things that I hadn't really experienced growing up in DC in the environment, and even going to school in North Carolina. And maybe being young, because I started off college at 16, I thought maybe I just didn't understand, I didn't see it, or I was just so friendly and naive to the world. Or people just didn't see me as a threat because it was just like, look at this friendly, nice boy, or someone who they could see as like their kid. And then once you graduate, it's like, oh, this person can compete for my job, my income. And the time frame that I started working was when contractors were making more than government employees at the time. So not only was I straight out of college making more than my mom, but also some of these government workers who had been there for such a long time. So you could see dynamics of where race tension could build up, along with just class and other hierarchical structures that I guess I hadn't been privy to until you start paying taxes at a larger scale when you're paying a mortgage.
Oh yeah.
So
that'll open your eyes, right? So I see. Thanks for watching. For access to the full-length conversation and all of the 2-hour-long unedited conversations that I've had on race, click the support link in the description below. Thanks for your support and see you next time.